Walter Briggs, a lonely widower in his late 70s, had always lived a life of frugality, saving every penny from his modest pension. One fateful evening, he stumbled upon a flashy online ad promising riches through next-generation cryptocoins. Desperate to leave a legacy for his estranged daughter, he poured his entire savings into the scheme. The next morning, his account showed zero. Broke and betrayed, Walter sets out on an extraordinary journey of revenge, redemption, and self-discovery. Walter Briggs sat in his modest living room, the ticking of the old grandfather clock the only sound accompanying him as he scrolled through the internet on his decade-old laptop. His life had become a monotonous routine since his wife passed away. At 78, Walter's world was small, consisting of his pension checks, crossword puzzles, and occasional phone calls to his daughter, Claire. But tonight, as the screen flickered with an ad, his heart raced in a way it hadn't in years. Future Coin, the investment of the century, the ad blared in bold neon letters. Beneath it, a montage played, a young man driving a sports car, an elegant woman sipping champagne on a yacht, a middle-aged couple laughing on a sun-soaked beach. "Turn your savings into millions," the voiceover boomed. Walter's cursor hovered over the link, his hand trembling. His pension, though sufficient for his modest lifestyle, wasn't enough to fund the dreams he still clung to. The dream of paying off Claire's debts, of sending his granddaughter to college, of finally taking that trip to Italy his wife had always talked about. He clicked. The website was dazzling. Charts with skyrocketing arrows, testimonials from smiling investors, and countdown timers ticking down to exclusive investment windows filled the screen. A live chat window popped up. "Hi there, I'm Kevin, your personal crypto consultant. Are you ready to secure your financial future?" Walter hesitated. "I don't know much about cryptocurrency," he typed. "That's the beauty of Future Coin," Kevin replied instantly. "You don't have to. Our experts handle everything for you. You just sit back and watch your investment grow." Walter's pulse quickened. The testimonials were convincing. "I turned $1,000 into $50,000 in just 3 months," one man claimed. Another, a smiling grandmother, declared, "Thanks to Future Coin, I'm retiring early." Walter's hand trembled as he reached for his wallet. "Kevin, how much do I need to start?" "Our most popular plan starts at $10,000, but for maximum returns we recommend the $50,000 premium package. And guess what? For the next hour we're offering a 20% bonus on all deposits." Walter's mind raced. His entire pension savings amounted to just over $50,000. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The thought of turning it into a fortune was intoxicating. He thought about calling Claire for advice, but quickly dismissed the idea. She'd always been skeptical of his ability to manage money and would surely dissuade him. "Time is ticking, Walter. The opportunity of a lifetime is just a click away." Before he could overthink it, Walter typed in his bank details and hit Invest Now. The screen erupted in virtual confetti and a message appeared. "Congratulations, Walter. Your journey to financial freedom begins now." For the first time in years, Walter went to bed with a smile on his face, dreaming of the life he could finally give his family. The next morning, he woke up with a spring in his step. He brewed his coffee and sat down at his laptop to check his investment. But when he tried to log into the Future Coin site, the screen displayed an error. "Page not found." Confused, he refreshed the page. Nothing. Panic began to creep in. He opened his email, searching for the confirmation from the previous night. It was gone. Every email from Future Coin had disappeared. Frantically, he called the number listed on the site, but it was disconnected. Walter's hands shook as the realization set in. He opened his bank account app, hoping for some reassurance. The balance read, $0.00. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking. "No, this can't be." The weight of what had happened crushed him. His entire pension, gone. Every dollar he'd worked for, every sacrifice he'd made, Every dream he'd held onto for his family had vanished in the blink of an eye. Tears streamed down his face as he sat frozen in his chair, the enormity of his mistake overwhelming him. That evening he called Claire, his voice trembling. I did something stupid," he admitted. "What happened, Dad?" Claire's voice was sharp with concern. I invested in something. A cryptocurrency. Future coin. And I lost everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Claire spoke. "Dad, I warned you about these scams. Why didn't you talk to me first?" I thought I was doing something good for us, for you and the kids." "Well, now we're worse off than before," Claire snapped, frustration lacing her words. "I don't have the money to bail you out, Dad. I barely have enough to keep the lights on." The call ended with strained apologies and unspoken resentment. Walter was left alone in his dark living room, staring at the screen that had promised him so much and delivered nothing but despair. But, as the hours passed, despair gave way to something else. A flicker of anger, then a blaze of determination. Walter might have been scammed, but he wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not without a fight. Walter spent the next few days in a daze, barely able to sleep or eat. He kept replaying the events in his mind, questioning how he could have been so foolish. But the despair was slowly giving way to a gnawing anger. Someone had stolen his life savings, and he wasn't going to let them get away with it. His first step was to file a police report. The officer behind the counter, a young man who looked like he had just graduated from the academy, listened with polite detachment as Walter explained the scam. "Unfortunately, sir," the officer said, "these types of scams are hard to trace. The websites are often hosted overseas." "So that's it? They just get away with it?" Walter asked, his voice rising. "We'll do what we can," the officer replied, though his tone was less than hopeful. "But I wouldn't get my hopes up." Unsatisfied, Walter turned to the internet. He spent hours researching online scams, learning about phishing schemes, and digging into forums where other victims shared their stories. Eventually, he came across a subreddit dedicated to exposing cryptocurrency scams. One post caught his eye. "Future coin, has anyone else been scammed?" Walter clicked on the thread and found dozens of comments from people who had fallen for the same scam. Some had lost thousands, others their entire life savings. One user, CryptoHunter88, claimed to have tracked the scam back to an offshore account linked to a company called Vega Holdings. "Who is behind Vega Holdings?" Walter typed into the thread. A reply came almost immediately. "Simon Vega. He's a notorious con artist running crypto scams for years. He's based in New York City, but good luck getting to him. The guy's untouchable." Walter's heart raced. For the first time, he had a lead. He might not have the resources to go after Simon Vega, but he wasn't powerless. He decided to reach out to CryptoHunter88 for more information. The next day, Walter received a response. "Meet me on Signal. Here's my contact info." Walter downloaded the app and nervously initiated the chat. CryptoHunter88 turned out to be Jacob, a young hacker in his 20s who had been tracking Vega for months. Initially skeptical, Jacob softened when Walter explained his situation. "You've got guts, old man," Jacob said during their video call. "Most people just accept their losses. If you're serious, I'll help you." Walter leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. "I'm serious. I want to take this guy down." Over the next few days, Jacob guided Walter through the process of gathering evidence. They tracked down shell companies Vega had used to launder money, traced IP addresses, and even hacked into an old server that contained logs of the scam's transactions. Walter was amazed at Jacob's skill, but he was also struck by the young man's anger. Jacob revealed that his own parents had been victims of a similar scam, losing their home as a result. "This isn't just about you, Walter," Jacob said. "People like Vega ruin lives. If we don't stop him, he'll just keep doing it." Their investigation led them to a luxury penthouse in New York City, where Simon Vega was reportedly living. Walter couldn't believe it. While he and others struggled, Vega lived in opulence, funded by their stolen money. But getting to Vega wasn't going to be easy. He had powerful connections and lawyers insulating him from legal consequences. Walter and Jacob needed a plan. "We need evidence that ties him directly to the scam," Jacob said. "Something concrete." "What about his next big event? These guys love to show off, right?" Walter asked. Jacob grinned. "Now you're thinking like a hunter. Let me dig." That night, Jacob hacked into Vega's server and found an invitation to an exclusive cryptocurrency expo in 2 weeks. The event was invite-only, but Jacob was confident he could forge an invitation for Walter. "This is our chance," Jacob said. "You'll go in as an investor. I'll be your eyes and ears from the outside. If we can get him to admit to the scam or find proof, we'll blow it wide open." Walter's stomach churned. The idea of confronting Simon Vega in person terrified him, but he couldn't back down. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice. For himself, Jacob's parents, and all the victims. As the days passed, Walter prepared. Jacob coached him on how to act like a wealthy investor, even helping him rent a suit to blend in. Walter practiced his lines in front of the mirror, trying to project confidence despite the fear gnawing at him. When the day of the expo finally arrived, Walter felt a mix of nerves and determination. He might have been an old man with limited resources, but he had something Vega didn't: a burning desire to set things right. As he boarded the bus to New York City, Walter clutched a small notebook filled with Jacob's teachings. He thought about his late wife and the promises he'd made to her. This wasn't just about avenging his losses. It was about restoring the pride and purpose he thought he had lost. This was it, the beginning of his fight to reclaim not just his money, but his dignity. The bus rumbled to a stop in Manhattan, and Walter stepped off, clutching his small travel bag and the forged invitation Jacob had prepared. The sheer scale of the city overwhelmed him. Skyscrapers loomed overhead, their glass gleaming in the sun. For a moment, he felt like an outsider in a foreign world. But then he remembered why he was here. Simon Vega. The Cryptocurrency Expo was at a luxurious 5-star hotel nearby. Walter adjusted his rented suit and clutched the forged invitation with clammy hands. Jacob had assured him it was flawless, but doubt gnawed at him. As he entered the grand hotel lobby, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers screamed wealth and privilege. The attendees buzzed with conversations about blockchains and decentralized platforms, words Walter barely understood. At the registration desk, he handed over his invitation. The young woman scanned it, smiled, and said, "Welcome, Mr. Briggs." Walter exhaled in relief and stepped inside. The expo floor was a maze of digital displays and booths promising to revolutionize the market. Pretending to browse, Walter scanned the crowd for Vega. Jacob's voice crackled in his earpiece. "You're in. Vega should be here soon. Just act natural." Walter nodded, murmuring under his breath, "Got it." A stir ran through the crowd. Cameras flashed as Simon Vega entered, surrounded by an entourage. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, Vega moved like a man who owned the world. Rage bubbled in Walter's chest. This was the man who had stolen everything from him. Yet here he was, basking in wealth and admiration. "That's him," Walter whispered. "Stick close," Jacob instructed. "He's hosting a panel soon. That's your chance." Walter followed at a distance as Vega entered the VIP area. Minutes later, the panel began in a grand ballroom filled with rows of chairs. Walter found a seat near the front, his heart pounding as Vega took the stage. The man's charisma was undeniable. He spoke with smooth confidence, weaving tales of limitless opportunities in the crypto world. The audience hung on his every word. Jacob's voice interrupted. "Infinity Token, his new project. It's Future Coin rebranded. This is your chance, Walter. Call him out." Walter's hands tightened on the armrests. When the panel opened for questions, he raised his hand. A microphone was passed to him and he stood, voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Vega, your presentation is impressive, but can you explain the sudden disappearance of Future Coin? Many investors lost their money, and it seems similar to Infinity Token." The room fell silent. Vega's smile faltered but quickly returned. "I'm not familiar with Future Coin," he replied smoothly. "Infinity Token is backed by cutting-edge technology." Walter pressed on. "So, you're denying any connection, because I've spoken to people who say otherwise." Vega's jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate baseless accusations, sir. If you're not here for meaningful discussion, I suggest you leave." Walter's voice rose. "Meaningful discussion. Is that what you call stealing people's life savings? I invested everything in Future Coin because of promises like these. How many more lives will you ruin before you're stopped?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vega's polished demeanor cracked, but before he could respond, Jacob's urgent voice came through the earpiece. "Walter, security's coming. Get out, now." Walter saw 2 guards approaching. Setting the microphone down, he slipped out of the ballroom, his heart racing. Jacob guided him through the earpiece. "Take the side exit. There's a stairwell to the service entrance." Walter moved quickly, avoiding the guards. He burst into an alley behind the hotel, leaning against the wall as he caught his breath. "You okay?" Jacob asked. Walter nodded, though Jacob couldn't see him. "Yeah, I'm okay." "You did good," Jacob said. "We've got people talking. This isn't over." Walter straightened, his resolve hardening. He thought about what Jacob had told him earlier, that people like Vega ruined lives, that if they weren't stopped, the cycle would only continue. For Walter, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping Vega from hurting anyone else. The memory of his wife's voice came to him, soft but firm, as if she were there with him. "Do the right thing, Walter," she used to say. He clenched his fists. Vega might have stolen from him, but he wasn't going to let the man walk away unscathed. "I'm ready for what's next," Walter said quietly. Jacob's voice crackled back. "Good, because we're not done yet. I've got another plan brewing. This time, we'll make sure he can't hide." Walter stepped into the sunlight, the shadows of the towering buildings stretching around him. He wasn't sure where the path ahead would lead, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The fight was far from over, but Walter was ready. Walter leaned back in the creaky chair of a small coffee shop Jacob had chosen as their meeting spot. The dim lighting and quiet atmosphere made it the perfect place to lay low while plotting their next move. Across the table, Jacob's laptop glowed with streams of data as his fingers flew across the keyboard. "I've been digging deeper into Vega's operations," Jacob said, his tone serious. "The guy's a ghost in the legal world. He has no direct ties to Future Coin or Infinity Token on paper, but I found something. Offshore accounts linked to a holding company in the Caymans. Vega uses it to funnel stolen money." Walter sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "So, how do we expose him?" Jacob smirked. "We hit him where it hurts, his reputation. The Infinity Token launches tomorrow night at a private gala. Investors, media, the works. If we leak proof of his connection to Future Coin during the event, his empire will crumble." "And how do we get into this gala?" Walter asked. "That's where you come in," Jacob said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "I forged credentials for you as an elite investor. While you're inside, I'll hack into their network. The USB has a payload to upload incriminating files directly to their presentation system. When Vega goes to showcase Infinity Token, the files will play instead." Walter stared at the USB. "What happens if I get caught?" "Don't get caught," Jacob said grimly. "But if you do, play the clueless old man card." The plan was risky, but Walter's determination outweighed his fear. Vega had ruined too many lives. It was time to fight back. The following evening, Walter arrived at the gala dressed in a sharp tuxedo Jacob had rented for him. The venue, a historic mansion on the outskirts of the city, was ablaze with lights. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and guests in designer outfits mingled on the red carpet. Walter adjusted his bow tie, his nerves threatening to get the better of him. "Remember, you belong there," Jacob's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Walk in like you own the place." Walter straightened his back and approached the entrance. He handed his forged credentials to the security guard who scanned them before nodding. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Briggs." Inside, the mansion was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings and classical music played softly. Walter grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, using it to blend in. He scanned the room, spotting Vega near the stage, surrounded by investors hanging on his every word. "Jacob, I see him," Walter whispered. "Good. Head toward the back of the room. There's a server port near the stage. That's where you'll plug in the USB." Walter weaved through the crowd, his heart pounding. He stopped occasionally to admire the artwork on the walls, feigning interest. When he reached the server port, he glanced around to ensure no one was watching. His hands trembled as he inserted the USB. "Uploading now," Jacob said. "Just a few more seconds." Walter held his breath, trying to appear casual. Suddenly, a voice behind him made his blood run cold. "Can I help you, sir?" Walter turned to see a security guard eyeing him. "Oh, no. Just admiring this painting," Walter said, gesturing toward a portrait. "Isn't it stunning?" The guard frowned but nodded. "Enjoy the event." Walter exhaled as the guard walked away. "That was close," he muttered. "Too close," Jacob replied. "The upload's done. Get back to the main hall." Walter rejoined the crowd just as the lights dimmed. Vega took the stage, smiling as he introduced Infinity Token. The audience applauded, and Walter's palms grew sweaty. This was it. Jacob's voice came through. Showtime. As Vega clicked to unveil his presentation, the screen behind him flickered. Instead of the Infinity Token logo, incriminating files appeared. Bank statements, emails, and server logs linking Vega to future coin. Gasps rippled through the room. "What is this?" Vega demanded, his voice shaking. "Shut it off." Security guards scrambled, but it was too late. Journalists snapped photos of the screen, and investors began murmuring angrily. Vega's composure cracked as he tried to regain control. "This is a smear campaign," Vega shouted. "None of this is true." But the evidence was damning. Walter watched as the once untouchable man unraveled. "Walter, get out," Jacob said urgently. "Security's locking down the exits." Walter slipped through the panicked crowd, his heart racing. He found a side door and disappeared into the night, adrenaline coursing through him. When he reached a safe distance, Jacob's voice came through again. "You did it, Walter. It's all over the news already. Vega's finished." Walter sank onto a bench, relief washing over him. For the first time in months, the weight of his loss felt lighter. Vega's empire was crumbling, but Walter knew the fight wasn't over. The battle for justice, for himself and the other victims, had only just begun. Walter woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Groggily, he grabbed it from the nightstand and blinked at the screen. Notifications flooded in. Headlines, texts, missed calls. "Cryptocurrency kingpin exposed," read one. "Simon Vega's empire crumbles amid scandal," screamed another. Walter sat up, his heart pounding. They had done it. The world finally knew the truth. Jacob called moments later. "Walter, you're famous," he said, half laughing. "Every major outlet is running the story. Investors are pulling out of Vega's projects and regulators are circling like vultures." Walter smiled faintly. "Good, but it's not enough. People like Vega always find a way to crawl back. What about the victims? How do they get their money back?" "That's the hard part," Jacob admitted. "But I've been tracking Vega's offshore accounts. If we can get into his personal server, we might find a way to recover the stolen funds." Walter's smile faded. "How?" Jacob hesitated. "It won't be easy. Vega's smart. He keeps his most sensitive data on a physical server at his penthouse. It's not connected to the internet. Which means—" "We have to break in," Walter finished, his voice grim. Jacob sighed. "Yeah, and it has to be you. I can't risk it. They know my face." Walter stared at the wall, the weight of the task sinking in. Breaking into Simon Vega's penthouse. It was madness. But then he thought about Claire, his granddaughter, and the countless others who had lost everything. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The next evening, Walter found himself standing outside Vega's towering penthouse building, his heart pounding. Jacob had provided him with a small bag of tools and instructions on how to bypass the building's security. "Just follow my directions and you'll be fine," Jacob had assured him. Walter slipped into the building through the service entrance, his palms sweaty. He took the freight elevator to the top floor where Vega's penthouse loomed. The hallway was eerily silent as Walter approached the door. He fumbled with the lock-picking tools Jacob had given him, his hands trembling. "Take a deep breath," Jacob said through the earpiece. "You've got this." After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open. Walter stepped inside, his breath catching at the sight. The penthouse was a shrine to excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, and gold accents everywhere. But Walter wasn't here to admire the decor. "The server's in his office," Jacob said. "End of the hallway, third door on the right." Walter moved quickly but quietly, his footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. He found the office door and slipped inside. The server was a sleek black tower humming softly in the corner. Walter pulled out the USB Jacob had given him and inserted it into the server. "Okay, it's copying the data," Jacob said. "This will take a few minutes. Just stay calm." Walter's nerves were frayed as he stood there, listening to the faint hum of the server. Every creak of the penthouse made him jump. Suddenly, the sound of the front door opening froze him in place. "Vega's here," Jacob whispered urgently. "Hide. Now." Walter scrambled, ducking behind a large desk just as footsteps echoed down the hallway. Vega's voice rang out, sharp and irritated. "What the hell is going on with Infinity Token? Who leaked that garbage?" Walter's heart pounded as Vega entered the office, pacing back and forth. "I don't care what it takes. Shut it down. Pay off whoever you need to." Vega barked into his phone. Walter crouched lower, praying Vega wouldn't notice the USB sticking out of the server. Jacob's voice came through the earpiece. "It's almost done. Just hang tight." But then Vega's eyes fell on the server. He frowned, stepping closer. "What the—" Walter acted on instinct. Grabbing a heavy paperweight from the desk, he stood and swung it with all his might. The paperweight collided with Vega's head, and the man crumpled to the floor. "Walter, what happened?" Jacob's voice was panicked. "He's out cold," Walter whispered, his voice shaking. "The data?" "Got it. Pull the USB and get out of there." Walter yanked the USB from the server and bolted. He slipped out of the penthouse and took the freight elevator down, adrenaline coursing through his veins. By the time he reached the alley behind the building, his legs felt like jelly. Jacob was waiting for him in a beat-up sedan. "You okay?" he asked as Walter climbed in. Walter nodded, his hands still trembling. "Did we get everything?" Jacob grinned, holding up his laptop. "Oh, we got more than everything. Bank account numbers, shell companies, lists of victims. It's all here. Vega's done." Walter leaned back in the seat, exhaustion washing over him. For the first time, he felt like they had truly won. But as the car pulled away, he couldn't help but think about the road ahead. Vega might be finished, but the fight for justice wasn't over. Walter wasn't done. Not yet. Walter stared out the window of the small diner where he and Jacob had agreed to meet one last time. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Simon Vega was no longer the untouchable kingpin he had once been. News outlets had painted him as a pariah, his assets were frozen, and a federal investigation was now in full swing. But Walter wasn't here to celebrate. There was still unfinished business. Jacob slid into the booth across from him, a laptop under his arm. He looked tired but energized. "We did it, Walter. Vega's empire is in shambles." Walter nodded. "What about the money? The victims?" Jacob opened his laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. "This is the full list of Vega's victims. Over 1,000 accounts tied to the scam. It's all here." Walter scanned the screen. "Can we get it back to them?" Jacob hesitated. "The funds are spread across dozens of offshore accounts. Tracking and redistributing them legally would take years, if it's even possible." Walter frowned. "So, what are you suggesting?" Jacob leaned in. "We bypass the red tape. I've been working with a group of activists called the Reclaimers. If we act now, we can funnel the money back directly to the victims." "Isn't that illegal?" Walter asked. Jacob shrugged. "What Vega did was illegal. What we're doing is justice." Walter thought of Claire, his granddaughter, and all the victims Vega had hurt. Finally, he nodded. "Let's do it." Over the next few hours, Walter watched as Jacob worked with the Reclaimers, transferring funds from Vega's accounts into thousands of smaller ones. Each transaction was marked with the note, "Reclaimed Justice." As the hours passed, Walter thought about the people whose lives were about to change, families who could finally breathe again. By sunrise, Jacob leaned back, exhausted. It's done. The victims will start seeing their money in days. Walter exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Jacob." "Don't thank me. You're the one who made this happen." Back at home, Walter found a voicemail from Claire. "Dad, I saw the news. I'm proud of you. Call me when you can." Walter smiled and dialed her number, ready to rebuild the bridges he thought were burned forever. In the weeks that followed, Walter became a symbol for justice among Vega's victims. People reached out to thank him, sharing stories of hope. Walter realized this fight was never just about his money. It was about redemption for everyone affected. Simon Vega now faced a litany of charges. Walter watched the news, satisfied that Vega's punishment would send a message. One evening, he received a photo from Claire and his granddaughter holding a sign. "Thank you, Grandpa." Tears blurred his vision as he realized he had reclaimed more than just money. He had regained his family. Sitting on his porch under the stars, Walter reflected on the long, grueling journey. Justice, he thought, wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance. And for Walter Briggs, balance had finally been restored.